and it is recording.
Well, perhaps just tell me when you're happy for.
Yeah, I'm just waiting for like us to get to maybe 100 maximum capacity. We're 86.
Quick.
Okay, I think maybe okay, it's still changing. Right. I think we can start just so we don't waste too much time. Hi, everybody. Can you hear me? I hope everybody can hear me. Okay. Hi. Thank you for coming to the information session. We're so many. Thank you. Just before we get started, a few housekeeping rules. You guys feel free to have a conversation in the chat section. If you have things to say to each other, to us, you can use the chat section. But if you have a question, please use the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen so that we can actually get to your question, right? For people who are unable to make it, we are going to make the recording available right after the webinar. And I suppose the last thing would be that the way this will run is that Eloho is going to give a quick run through of what FirstCheck is, who we are, and what we are hoping to achieve here. And then we will do a short Q&A after. So we've been getting questions from you over the past 1.5 weeks about what you'd like to see addressed and the information that you'd actually like to hear. So some of it will be covered in the presentation, some of it would answer after. So we don't want to waste too much of your time. This is going to be very short and very straight to the point. So we will get started. So don't forget, use the Q&A function and then use the chat function as well. Welcome. And thank you. My name is Odunayo and one of the co-founders of FirstCheck. Eloho, you're muted.
Sorry, I can't believe I'm still doing that. So you're good for me to go, right?
Yes, I am.
I'm just going to share my screen. She says she's going to share her screen and the screen is messing up. All right, cool. So can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
All right, awesome. So welcome everyone. Thank you for making the time with us at 7 p.m. on a Friday night. So we're going to run through very quickly, like Odu said. I'm going to take like 20 minutes just to run through who we are, what we're trying to get done, and how we're thinking about the FirstCheck model, which actually has shifted a little bit since we did our launch announcement, actually in response to some of the what people wanted to see from us and the support that we've gotten, which has been overwhelming. So that's fantastic. And then, like she said, anything that's not covered, happy to answer. So I'll take about 20 minutes. And as we go, drop your questions in because it also helps us think about what to focus on. So basically, our sort of true north is fixing this gender funding gap in African tech. I'll run through some of the numbers in a second, but the idea is really that there's a glaring funding gap. And obviously the way that funding in general globally works is failing women. I think that point is no longer in dispute. So what's clear is that whatever the old models and the old frames are, they're not working. So we kind of need to reimagine it. And FirstCheck is our reimagining of the approach, at least as it relates to Africa. There's a bunch of different funds taking a bunch of funds and communities taking a bunch of different approaches in other parts of the world. And we believe that we're the first of this type in Africa. We look forward to other people also starting to adjust how they perhaps look at their funding frames, etc. for women. Our mission, this is our mission statement. Our mission is to advance equity, capital, and leadership for a generation of women in Africa through technology and entrepreneurship. And you'll see as I go through the presentation that there are a couple of ways that we hope to do this. In terms of the data, I'll run through this very quickly, and my hope is that if you're on the call, your mission aligns, you have a sense of some of the data. But there are gaps, whether you're talking about tech employees, whether you're talking about tech funding. Less than 1 in 3 tech employees in Africa are female. Less than 10% of startups funded between 2012 and 2017 were led by a woman. Less than 10% of funded startups led by women have raised over $1 million in the last 10 years, which is really staggering because $1 million is, I'm not even sure that, I think sort of seed stage fundraisings in the US, for example, are closer to about 3 to 5 million at this stage. 2021 has been great for female founders in Africa. 5 out of 21 funded startups had a woman CEO. At the same time, we all know, or at least you should know, that the data coming post-pandemic suggests that the hardest hit communities have been women, whether that has been on the employment side or it's been on the fundraising side. And that is as true in Africa as it is anywhere else. So what we're trying to do is really to address this diversity gap, this funding gap in African tech, but through a really intentional, what we're calling a bottom-up approach. What does that mean? It means that we're not satisfied with the idea that there's not enough women at the top of the funnel, there's not enough, the pipeline isn't strong enough for women. We're saying, well, fine, if that's the case, let's fix the pipeline. If that's the case, let's create the opportunities at the top of the funnel. So we have sort of 5 goals that we're trying to achieve broadly through FirstCheck over the medium term. We want to increase the pipeline of female entrepreneurs by making it easier for women to raise their first capital. And sometimes making it easier is things like not insisting on competitions. We find that the data supports the idea. I think the IFC or the World Bank had some data a few years ago that supports the idea that, even when you normalize for access at the top of the funnel, when you start to do things like put in place accelerators and competitions and all of those things are a little bit awkward for women for multiple reasons, including the fact that where we spend our time is a bit different. You really start to see the drop off very quickly. The other thing we want to do is we want to support the most ambitious women in practical, tactical ways to increase their chances of success. So for us, we're going to be super discerning about who we actually give capital to. We're only a small angel fund, but at the same time, we really want to sort of, roll up our sleeves and be practical and tactical in terms of how we then help those women that we are able to support through FirstCheck Africa. We want to directly address the biases women face while fundraising by working closely with allies in the investor community. What does that mean? A lot of those allies are men, and that's a fantastic thing, right? Whether it's people that, at the heads of seed stage funds, whether it's people that are part of investment teams, etc. Whether it's people who have the expertise and the talent around engineering and growth and all of those skills that are important when you're company building. The good news is there's so many allies. I think we've been overwhelmed by the numbers that have come through in the last month, and a lot of those have been people who are not women, who are saying, look, how do I help? Where do I send my check? So the wonderful thing that we're finding is there's a lot of allyship around this goal. The 4th thing we want to do is close the gender confidence gap by amplifying female founders and women in tech. So the gender confidence gap is that affects all of us, whether we're talking about tech or otherwise. And there are multiple reasons why it happens. So to pretend it doesn't exist, I don't think we serve our community well. So the question is, if it does exist, how do we quickly sort of cut it off at the knees? So in many ways, we find that, in building our community, what we want to do is we want to amplify women. So we want to sort of showcase women who are doing interesting things, game-changing things, ambitious in tech, whether they're in Africa or otherwise, and give them a platform. The other thing that happens is that, and I think this happens in all spheres, even outside tech, is that there tend to be a very small group of people who tend to get the spotlight. So we want to sort of look for ways to amplify different people who are doing interesting things as well, who are doing things that we should be celebrating, who are outside of perhaps the people who normally naturally get some of the spotlight. And we think by just sort of having that much more inclusive approach to how we amplify women and how we build the community around FirstCheck, we think all of that will go towards putting a dent in that confidence gap. Finally, we want to create opportunities for African women to create wealth from tech by investing and learning as a community. What does that mean? The idea is that there's the women who are the founders themselves and they have equity in the startups, and that's one way to create wealth. Another way to create wealth, of course, is to invest. And again, in very similar ways to other parts of the world, when you are outside of the networks that traditionally get these opportunities, and or where you don't necessarily have you don't feel as if you have the experience or the learning to do certain things, then perhaps it's harder for you to start to do things like invest in tech, which is obviously a great way to potentially build wealth as part of your overall sort of wealth creation plan. So what we want to do is look for opportunities through little things like, sorry guys, doing little things like, dropping investment minima for women. The other thing is also looking for structures that allow us to be a little bit more inclusive as well. So where we see opportunities in female-led or gender diverse teams, looking for allocations that allow us to bring in people from our community who are women. Now, I'll talk a bit about how we got a lot of questions about how the what we're calling our investor collective will work, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. So what are we essentially? FirstCheck Africa is a female-led, female-focused angel fund with a self-directed mandate. What does that mean? It means that really FirstCheck Africa is Odunayo. We have been very, very careful about, in fact, we started this off not allowing anybody else into the angel fund. Our views around that are shifting because we think that by allowing people on a selective basis in, very small number, it increases the opportunity set around what we're able to do. But what is very, very clear to us and what is non-negotiable for us is that this mandate is self-directed. What does that mean? It means that we can bring to bear the flexibility that we think that this challenge requires. We can make decisions very quickly. We can do certain things that perhaps are outside of what other investors might struggle to do because they have a fund mandate. That means that they can't do certain things and they can't invest in certain kinds of companies. So we have a differentiated model which places community building at FirstCheck Africa's core. And these are the 6 elements on the right-hand side of this slide of what we will be doing through FirstCheck Africa. So we'll be female founders, early believers with up to $25,000 in ideation capital per investment. We will be growing our network of partners to support the journeys of founders that are within our community. We'll be driving audience and community with an open digital content strategy. So for example, learning and video content on YouTube around company building, raising capital, marketing, all the things that, all the questions that startup founders tend to have in the very early days. We'll be amplifying female founders and women in tech as role models. And we want to catalyze this role model effect to bridge the confidence gap, which I already spoke about. So basically, we're building a community. We believe that we're hopefully inspiring a generation. Our community will be unparalleled, and it will be African women in tech, whether they are founders, whether they are, developers, whether they are, marketing professionals, what have you. And the idea is if you build this community around women and you inspire women and you create those opportunities for women, we believe that we can get some really interesting really interesting game-changing startups come out of that kind of engagement, which is very much around sort of building communities and using that as a flywheel for what we're trying to get done. So our target is to deploy $1 million of what we call catalytic capital by 2023. Some of that is first checks at the top of the funnel. And also tied to that, tactical support for the women within the portfolio to support them from launch to MVP to seed. So all the way from, and we'll talk about where we want to invest and where our sweet spot is. But the idea is that we want to sort of be able to help women raise those sizable seed checks, which are not happening at the moment. We want to also deploy some capital into capacity building through digital events, videos, content, social. We want to build audience and community. Our target is 1 million African women and girls in STEM. So basically pull these people into a community. And then we want to build, or we are building, a platform for more women entrepreneurial role models. We think that by through this $1 million, we can catalyze $20 million. And the way that we'll do that is by using our capital, our relationships, our networks to catalyze the next stage of funding. So seed stage funding for these women. And we think our approach is quite unique, is quite differentiated. We're aware that it's hard work, but we're pretty excited to get started. We think we're the best people for the job. So different track records, but quite complementary track records. Odunayo obviously is the co-founder of PiggyVest. She's a board member at Village Capital. She's an angel investor. I'm an angel investor. I used to be a VP at a growth equity firm, which tends to invest slightly later stage than what we're talking about here. I ideated, I built, I launched Lagos Innovates, which is the largest early stage support program run by a subnational government, probably in Africa. And up until today, or up until tomorrow, I am the managing director of Endeavor. And for those who don't know Endeavor, we support what we call scale-up stage entrepreneurs in 38 markets, but my remit was or is Nigeria. So year one, we're viewing year one very much for FirstCheck Africa as a proof of concept. We want to make 6 investments from the FirstCheck Africa Angel Fund directly. And we've been public about sort of, what those investments, well, at least the check size that we're likely to write. I'll talk about some of the details around that in a second. We also want to build out our public learning content library on starting up product growth, company building. We want to start to run inclusive learning and events for our community and our audience. We're looking for some high value, high leverage partnerships, and I'll talk about what that means in a second. And we want to launch the FirstCheck Africa Investor Collective. I'll talk about what that is in a second as well. It'll be super important for us, of course, that having made those 6 investments through the course of the year, we can also track that into significant follow-on or seed stage funding for the companies that are our investee companies. So we've spoken about this up to $25,000 per investment a few times now. And people, of course, are asking, well, what kinds of companies will you invest in? One of the questions we keep getting, for example, also is, what's going to be your equity stake? And I think we're a little bit more flexible than that. The quick answer to the equity stake question is we don't have a fixed equity stake. We want to be fair to the women that we're investing on, to the teams that we're investing in. We'll also invest in diverse teams. We want to make it, we don't want to be a hindrance to their ability to raise follow-on capital. We have a mission that says that we're catalyzing equity and capital for women as well. So that would be at odds with us being overly risk averse, I guess, in how we think about our equity. We want to invest in software businesses or tech-enabled product or service delivery businesses. So what does that mean? It doesn't necessarily mean last mile. What it means is that the way that you think about your product or your distribution is very much embedded in tech, if you're not a software company. We're looking for differentiated market opportunities. We like people who have what we call strong ideas loosely held. The opposite of that is weak ideas strongly held. And the reason that we say strong ideas loosely held is because obviously at the pre-seed stage, there's a lot that you're doing that is still experimentational. And the idea is that you have a thesis and you're testing it, you're building a prototype, you're doing user research, etc. And as you collate information and you receive that feedback, you're learning from it and perhaps tweaking the idea, the product, the model. Very often we see people who have a very fixed idea and this is what I want to do. And that often doesn't work, especially not in a market like ours. We're looking for people that have a high velocity mindset. What does that mean? You want to move quickly. You're constantly looking to move, right? And you're doing things carefully. You're running experiments. But we're not really, we're not looking to allocate this capital to anybody who wants to sit on it for a year. We're hoping that in 3 months, 4 months, we're able to get from quite early on in the product development up until hopefully up to MVP, hopefully. We're looking for female founders or diverse teams. So we've gotten this question quite a lot. Will you only invest in women? No, we'll invest in diverse teams. We just want teams that are going to be fair to the women that are in the teams. So we want positive, equitable team dynamics. So we want to see women that are part of a co-founding team and really have a decision-making voice, as well as obviously have an equity share or a fair share of the equity in the startup. We're not running demo days or competitions. I'll talk about our application process in a minute. So we see ourselves as partners for ambitious female founders building technology companies. Our first filter is founder quality, evidenced by self-motivation, signs of early execution with limited resources, and a lean startup mindset. So back to this idea of strong ideas loosely held. Signs of early execution, we'll find women at different stages. What doesn't really work is I have an idea, here's a slip of paper, off you go, FirstCheck, give me the money. I don't really think that works. We're really looking for people who are have that really high velocity mindset around their ideas and they're constantly developing idea to concept, etc. So the ideal founder journey for us is sort of laid out here. It's not set in stone in that you don't necessarily have to be so early where you're taking the funding and using our funding to prove the concept. What we know is that we're certainly coming in at a pre-seed stage or at the very latest around where there's an MVP. And we'll make those decisions on a case-by-case basis. One of the reasons why we structured it this way is because we want to help the women raise the seed stage funding. So if you're already sort of raising your seed round, you already have a healthy subscription level within your seed round. Our capital is probably not capital that's going to that's particularly helpful or additive in there, and it's probably not, from our perspective, not where our capital is best spent. So we can't invest in all founder profiles. We have limited resources. So what does that mean? It means we have to unfortunately exclude some kinds of founders and companies from our investment pipeline. We can't invest, or we will not invest in companies with no clear technology advantage, either on the product or distribution side. We are not investors in social impact or not-for-profit companies. At the end of the day, we're making investments because we hope to make a good return on the back of it, and that's not always necessarily compatible with the objectives around social or not-for-profit. Where we see ideas only with no effort at development. So again, back to this idea of here's my idea, how do I apply, with no sense of how that idea has been developed from anything other than, you know, a slip of paper. We tend not to be comfortable. We want to see people who have that sort of hustle mentality around how they think about their ideas, and with whatever limited resources they have, are constantly pushing those concepts forward, pushing that prototype forward, pushing that MVP forward. We want to invest in non-diverse teams. So, well, to be fair, we'll invest in female-only teams, but we won't invest in male-only teams. And the reason for that is just the mission. We're really, really keen on just making sure that we obviously advance equity and we advance diversity for women in tech. We won't invest in side hustles that don't grow. So you have a side hustle, it hasn't grown, you haven't really focused on it for the last 3 to 5 years, and you bring it to FirstCheck and you say, I have this great idea. It's not really one for us. And then we're also a little bit nervous when we see founders that believe that we're going to be these sort of evangelists that are going to fix their ideas or their companies. I think you should view us as a partner, but at the end of the day, it's your idea, it's your business. And again, back to that concept of strong ideas loosely held, it's your responsibility to push it forward, not really ours. So what does that all mean? We've got a bunch of questions around on the left-hand side of my page, how can I invest with you? On the right-hand side of my page, how can I partner with you? So here are hopefully some of the answers to those points. So we want to responsibly, and I use that word very deliberately, democratize access to technology and startup investing for everyone, especially women. What does that mean? It means that, the venture asset class is obviously, it's a risky asset class, or at least there's very little liquidity in it for a long time. And so as much as it's an opportunity to create wealth, we're very conscious that it's also an opportunity where if people don't approach it in the right way, you can potentially lose a lot of money. So we want to figure out ways to democratize that access, both in terms of the access to the deals and ability to write checks into it, but also, on the other side, the learning that allows people to feel confident around their ability to write those checks. So the Investor Collective will create an opportunity for people to invest in our pipeline of female founders and diverse teams. Also to invest alongside some of the seed stage funds in our network. So what I mean by that is we've invested in a founder, we've worked with her and her team, her and her team. We've taken the company to a certain stage. She's now ready to raise seed stage. We want to be able to open up those opportunities to people who are within the Investor Collective. In terms of the Investor Collective, the structure is still in development. So what we will do is we will share that information. As long as you're on our email list, we'll share that information with you at the right time. On the partnership side, we're open to what we call high leverage partnerships. Excuse me, let's turn off my printer. So on the partnership side, we're open to what we call high leverage partnerships. We don't have a formal partnership for funds that want early pipeline access. What does that mean? We're getting quite a bit of inquiries around how do I invest with you? How do I invest with you? People can invest with us, of course, in terms of when we're ready to show the deals to raise the seed stage funds. But what we can't do is give anybody preferential access to the pipeline because it's not really in the interest of our founders. We're looking for specific opportunities. We're looking for partners who are going to be specific with us on a bunch of things that we're working on. So we want to publish the first specific diversity, equity, and inclusion data and reporting for women in Africa, beyond just sort of some of those headline numbers that we keep seeing. So what is the experience of women that are trying to raise capital? How long does it take? When we say that, women, less than 10% of women have raised more than $1 million, how long did it even take the people who did it? And I think we'll find that when we start to look at some of those effects in granular detail, the reality is that the picture is a little bit more mixed than perhaps it might even appear even from those numbers. And we've talked a bit about some of our community and learning events. We've talked about what we want to do around capacity building, at least as it relates to the content. We're also looking for partners who will work with us on capacity building in specific ways. So engineering, product, marketing within our community and for the founders. And we're, of course, more broadly, we're looking for support capital to scale FirstCheck Africa's community to more than 1 million in audience and formal community members. What we struggle with a little bit is when people want to partner with us to mentor women. I'll be quite transparent about that. I think it's important that we just start to understand that there are more high value and more high leverage ways to help women. Just mentorship on its own is something that we would struggle to partner on. So the most frequently asked questions. Our North Star is to find a model that meaningfully changes the experience of female founders in Africa over the next 12 to 18 months. So what does that mean? It means some of the things that we're doing are a little bit experimentational. We have a frame or we have a thesis around how certain things will work. We'll test a bunch of things. If they don't work, we'll tweak them until we find a model that works. That means that we're actually putting a dent in some of those numbers. Some of the questions we're getting most often: will we invest only in tech companies? Yes, directly. But we're looking into how or if we can find other ways to help non-tech founders also access capital. Is there a minimum equity share? No, not for now anyway, and I've spoken about that earlier. We're founder friendly. We're also looking to make meaningful returns on our equity, so we'll be fair. And I think that this question often comes from the perspective of, are you going to take too much equity? I don't know what too much equity is, but we're not going to publish an equity share because there's so much that we're doing that is experimentational. Will the investor collective only be open to women? No. Our goal is to catalyze capital for women. We will, however, create a structure that allows women to more comfortably invest in our pipeline. But the investor collective will be open to everybody. The idea is through the investor collective to have more capital available for the women within our portfolio. So in terms of next steps, before, I think I'm missing a slide. Okay. In terms of next steps for founders, investors, and partners, who I think are the three main groups that we have on this call. For founders, we have a rolling application process, and submissions must come via our online form. Thank you for your patience over the last 3 or 4 weeks whilst you've waited for that. A few people have sent us decks, and I love the energy. People have sent us decks via email. Unfortunately, we're not going to be able to process anything that comes through email because it's very hard for us to control that. But after this call, everybody will receive an email that gives you a link to our application form, and we ask that you please just resubmit those through our formal application process, and we try to respond within 7 days. For investors, if you're interested in investing in or joining effectively the investor collective, we're not quite ready with that, but basically that is where we take women that are within our pipeline, so tech companies and high quality companies led by women or have women on the teams that are not necessarily companies that FirstCheck can invest in, because we're looking at tech only businesses, but we really like. We also want to show those opportunities to the investor collective as well. And there are a couple of really strong candidates already. When we're ready to launch the investor collective, please make sure that you're on our email list so that you get notified, and all the modalities around how that will work, we'll make sure that you get that. And then partners, and we've talked about the kinds of partners that we're looking for. So please email us at hello@firstcheck.africa if you're interested in one of our specific areas of focus. If you know that broadly you're willing to partner with us on those specific areas of focus, but you don't necessarily have a model or a framework in mind, we're happy to work with you to develop that. Here's our information. There's our website address. You can reach us at hello@firstcheck.africa if you don't fall already into one of these buckets with these instructions. Other than that, if you've not read our launch announcement, it's on Medium. We're firstcheckhq.medium.com. And I think that's it for me, although I'm going to hand back to you now.
Right. Thank you, Eloho, and thank you everybody for listening very attentively and like all your incredible questions. So like Eloho said, we've been getting quite a number of questions, and we thought like best to present first and try to answer, well, attempt to answer some of them. And then, essentially, we will then get to the questions. So a lot of the questions that we got have been answered, but there's still some that are outstanding. So we'll take them live here now. Will the investment be capped at 25K, or is it possible that you invest more than 25,000?
I was going to say questions for you. So that you
what would you say? Yeah, these are some of the questions that we like got via email, via the Zoom registration. And then I'll take the ones on the Q&A dashboard as well. So what do you think, Eloho? Will the investment, absolutely, they'll be capped at 25K. The idea isn't for us to be the ones to give you all of the money you used to build your company. The idea is to seed it in a way that you can, build an MVP, prove your concept, and then we present you to the seed funding and, subsequent like round investors. So the problem that we're trying to solve here is very specific. The problem of being able to start, or having started, the problem of continuing to make yourself attractive to subsequent investors. So yeah, it will be 25K for a bit. I don't know, sometime in future with my review, but like in the short term that we're sure of, it will be 25K. If I have more than one startup, can FCA invest in both, or are you capping it at one startup per person? I would like to, get submissions from this person and kind of just see both startups or all four of them, if they're up to four, and see what the odds say about us investing in one or all of them. But ideally, the law of large numbers doesn't support us investing in two of your startups at the same time just because one will be better and we will pick the better one.
Yeah, but I guess the other way that I would sort of think about that, and it's interesting because I guess, like you say, we'd have to see it. But the other way I would think about that is, why do you have four startups that you're working on?
I don't know. It's possible. It's possible. They're entirely possible. Maybe they're in different sectors. That's interesting to kind of think about.
That would make me a little bit nervous, but yeah.
Okay. We've answered the question about investing in mixed founder teams. We absolutely will invest in mixed founder teams. We just want women to play a key role. We don't want you to try to prop women up in a bid to access the funding that FCA is offering. We want to see the women making decisions in the company, like running the company alongside you. You get, so that's kind of the focus here, empowering women in a way that's scalable and sustainable. What resources will you be providing for first-time women joining our investor community? How will you help them understand the thought processes behind backing certain startups? So you see, like Eloho mentioned earlier, this is something that we're still constructing and we're still building. And these are absolutely important considerations that we would not launch without having figured out. So we don't have everything. We're not going to tell you that we have everything figured out right now. That's why we're taking it stage by stage, right? So once the investor collective is ready to launch, it's absolutely imperative that women feel very, very comfortable investing in the pipeline. So that means that we will allow what is the minimum amount, what is the maximum amount. These are the things that you need to read up about the startup to be able to make a decision on whether to join a round. And obviously we will also get a lot of educative content around becoming an angel investor and kind of making all these decisions and what you should look out for. The idea is to create like a community, a really strong community of female angel investors, so that there's a pipeline of money that's directly running to women as well. What will your selection and screening process be for startups aside? Well, we have a form, and so that means that we will make it public, and you fill, and then we'll take it from there. The screening process is really very simple, and I think it was covered in the slide. Tech-enabled, strong idea, loosely held. We're going to look at you as a founder, right? And the journey that you've been on already and the journey that you want to go. What are your motivations? Why are you doing this? And how scalable and sustainable is the idea, just generally? What else?
I have some for you on the thing in general. I can try and help you.
Yeah.
Sure. All right, before I ask you the ones that we have on the thing, guys, I can see that some people are putting questions in the chat. I'm really sorry. I'm going to struggle to monitor questions in two places.
Chat, yes.
Question in the chat, please retype it in the Q&A. And although I'll just try and get questions from the Q&A for you now.
Okay, there's one here on this Google Doc that says, is our investment criteria including the team's location? For example, a team whose startup has African customers but is based in the diaspora. And that's an interesting question.
It's an interesting one. It's harder. I don't want to rule it out because again, we're trying to be a little bit experimentational and sort of stay open.
Yeah.
Challenge with that is, if we think about the gap and the data that we're responding to and we're trying to solve for, I'm not sure that by doing that we necessarily are putting a dent in that goal of saying, do you know what I mean? So that would be there.
Open and close date for the investment. I think that's the last one here. The rest are collective, specific questions. And guys, we really don't have information about the collective figured out yet. We will let you know as soon as we do.
What do you mean open and close dates? What's that?
For applications. So no, we review applications on a rolling basis. So you can submit applications whenever you have your information ready and together. You can submit and we'll review. There are no open dates or close dates.
Sure. So, okay, so let me run you through some of the questions I got here. Interesting one. Are you considering an operator network where experts can support with advisory services? If so, how can I learn more about supporting this?
Well, we are, absolutely. I think that very early stage startups require a lot of support, and a lot of that support should be hopefully free. please. So we will, we will definitely be forming one. And I think that this constitutes part of like a partnership type situation, I think. But ideally, we would start to constitute that once we have the structure of like, okay, these are the startups that we're going to invest in and this is what they are going to need, and then we'll make an open call. But for now, I think join our mailing list and just select partner, and then we can take it from there. We think that it's going to be very, very interesting to see just how much legal support and accounting support and operation support that these startups can get from the wider network. So please join the mailing list, and at some point we will be like contacting you to ask you what kind of support that you can provide for the startups.
Okay, I'm seeing questions, and guys, I'm not reading them. I can just see question type things coming into the chat. Please don't put your questions in the chat because we will struggle to get to them there. Put them in the Q&A so that we can make sure that we're reading them. So would we invest in, hi Eloho, would you invest in solo founders with no team yet? Odun?
I will not say no. I would like to like kind of hear why you're a solo founder, why don't you have a team yet? And there can be good reasons for that. And so I wouldn't rule it out. I will say though that it's best to have co-founders because like startups are hard and you can't go at it alone. But there are sometimes you have great reasons why you have you are a solo founder, and we can probably help you with constituting a team as you move on your journey. So we don't rule anything out.
Yeah, I think that issue of constituting a team, sometimes just even finding
the right vibe, the right people.
So one thing that we want to do, and please nobody hold me to it for the first year, is think about ways in which we can actually help people find co-founders, etc.
Okay.
So it says, so we've done that one. Will a solo female founder with no team get a chance? Absolutely, we've answered that. Any ideas on the minimum capital for angel investors? Not yet. That's the founder collective, playing around with so many different things. Always making me do calls on Saturdays about that. So
we're just trying to figure it out, guys. I can promise that as soon as we have answers, you guys will know.
Are you more favorably disposed towards founders who are already in the MVP stage over those who are in idea stage pre-MVP?
I wouldn't say more favorably or less favorably. I think that as long as you are not raised a pre-seed or seed round, and you're at that, just like, just like slightly pre-MVP, MVP, just built my MVP. It's a very awkward point. So we're happy to talk through it. The one thing that we'll say is that if you've already raised a round, we don't think that that's where our capital should be going, just because there's so many people who haven't yet gotten that chance and need like a lot of help and a lot of capital. And so rather it's directed there. But if you've already built your MVP or you haven't built your MVP, we're happy to talk. Again, the criteria for picking a founder to invest in or to go on a journey with is absolutely not, like, it's not set in stone. It's everything, all of these things come. The only thing that's set in stone is the stage of your company that you're at. If you are like more advanced in that, you're already like getting traction and things like that, then you're obviously a bit too late for us. And there's more people like behind there that we can help.
Okay, cool. So I'm going to answer some of these questions, I think, because we've covered them, but will the slides be shared for our perusal, please? Absolutely. As soon as this call, we'll share it. There's another one here that says, I feel really bad that somebody actually feels they need to ask this. They said something like, if I have a male founder, will you invest?
We will invest. We will invest.
I'm so sorry that people feel they have to ask that. Yes, so we just want to see women on the teams, right? Yes. If it's an all-male team, we cannot invest, we will not invest. And of course, the other response to that, of course, is some people say, well, I'm going to just grab a woman and put her on my, well, it's not, we probably won't invest there either, because we're looking to make sure that she's a true part of the team and the dynamic, yes. Dynamic makes sense. So we just want to help women advance their equity, their capital, their leadership in the startup community. And we'll do that by investing in women-led teams or teams that include women in meaningful ways. But absolutely, we won't say there's a guy on the team, so we won't invest. Is funding restricted to just women who are technical founders? No, the funding is for women who are building technology companies, technology-enabled companies.
Yeah.
Sometimes that means that you're not a technical person and you have to figure out how you sort out the technical expertise. Sometimes it means you need to look for a technical co-founder, and where we think we can help then we would try and help there. But no, we're not looking for only engineers, for example.
There's one here.
Yeah, go on.
Will you require founders of investee companies to work exclusively full-time on the startup? I don't think I should hesitate to say, I think yes. Once like an investor is like handing you money, I think that for the time period, there is an expectation, even if not all of your time, 90% of your time be spent working on that startup, just because like we are now dedicating capital to making sure it succeeds. And there's also kind of a journey that comes after it. So the answer is mostly yes. So.
Okay. So just typing this response to somebody's question. Should be clear. Sorry, I'm not typing as clear as I thought I could. Will you be open to partner with individuals or organizations only? The quick answer to that is we'll partner with anyone who we think is a serious partner. But we've talked about, we're very specific about where our areas of focus are in partnering. So, if that individual has the capacity to do the partnering with us around the engineering, the marketing, all of those things that we want to do, great. If the individual is reaching out saying, I want to mentor your founders, we don't need that right now.
Yeah.
There's a geographic one that keeps coming
yes.
up. We have specific countries of interest for is Start or is FirstCheck open to female founders from across Africa? Well, technically FirstCheck is open to female founders from across Africa. The reality is in writing checks across geographies, there's a little bit of work that needs to happen in each market. So in principle, we're quite happy to do it. We don't have a challenge. I think naturally, because we're both based in Nigeria, we'll start with Nigeria, but that doesn't mean we'll necessarily sequence markets. I think, as long as we can figure out how to actually deploy capital into a market, if we love the idea, we'll do everything we can to make sure that happens.
Yeah.
Okay.
So just on a general level, if you're asking about like being an investor, investing in the collective, investing in the startup, I think that you should just take it that the answer is that we don't know yet. We're like researching and we're working to like put out a structure that works for both us and for you and for the startups. So those answers we cannot present to you on this call, but as soon as we do, you get an email from us saying that the collective is ready and all of the information you need around minimum capital investment, maximum capital investment, the resources you need to have, whether or not you can pick the startup to invest in, whether it's a rolling fund or an SPV type situation. We will like let you know about everything just so we don't keep like rehammering on the same point. So it's the startups first, collective next, and then we just take it from there.
Sure. I think mostly answered. Somebody's asking me to clarify something, so if you don't mind, let me clarify. It says clarify some more on this strong ideas loosely held. Does it mean that applications are just based on an idea, or is there a preference for startups with traction? Please share more. So no, what I meant by that is not necessarily saying we only want, in fact, it's not saying at all, we only want startups or founders that have ideas, and anything more advanced than an idea is too late for us. I think more what it's saying is that when you're in that pre-seed stage, when you're working towards the MVP, even when you have the MVP, the idea is that you're constantly responding to your user feedback and you're constantly responding to what the market is telling you and what your users are telling you. You're not necessarily going there with a fixed idea around, this is my product, and whether or not the product actually works, whether or not I'm seeing, I'm getting the traction around the user numbers, for example, etc. rather. This is the product and that's what it's going to be end all. I think what we're saying is we need people to be in that experimentational mindset. So you have the idea, but you're willing to capitulate to better information as your users respond to your product, etc. Onyolabi, sorry. Hello, apologies if I missed this. Are you seeking investors? Odun?
So not yet. I think that's the answer. For this first year, like we mentioned, it's a proof of concept journey. And while we have adjusted a little to allow certain people into the round, we're not currently seeking investors. In the next 1 year, we will be. And in the next couple of months, we will be forming a collective as well, which I suppose is a form of seeking investors, where you'll be able to invest as a community in FirstCheck's pipeline specifically, and other like non-tech enabled women businesses that we think are absolutely like that are scalable and sustainable as well. So right now, not seeking investors. We are, however, seeking support capital. Like was on the deck that we will end up that we'll share, and we're also like putting an open call out for partners on specific parts of our vision and mission that we've already made public. So we will share the deck. You'll have a chance to go through again and kind of understand where we're coming from with this and see where like you can possibly come in.
Cool. On a lighter note, why did you use the name FirstCheck CK instead of FirstCheck QUE?
First of all, people can spell QUE check.
Why though?
It was an available domain name, and like it's simple enough. And it was literally, we were having a conversation and Eloho said, I want to be the first check. And I said, I think that's a great name. And that's how we picked it. Yeah. And I don't think we actually ever looked at the spelling in that way.
I also think, don't forget that we then looked at logos and you have the check mark.
Oh yeah, the check mark. Right, I forgot that part. Sorry.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry, I'm trying to. We invest in founders that are co-located in different geographies. I think the answer, we've kind of answered that. As long as one of them is on the African continent, we probably prefer at least one, but we'll generally try and keep an open mind.
Yeah.
Somebody says, in other words, if I have just this great idea, can I go ahead and apply? Well, I mean, I would be a little bit careful with that, right? So you have an idea, we all have great ideas, right? What have you done with your great idea? I'd be a little bit uncomfortable if all you were doing was writing a one line in an email or a scrap of paper and sending that in. I think there are ways to develop ideas, right? Have you taken your idea in your mind into a concept stage? Have you done a bit of have you done some research? Have you spoken to some potential users? Have you scoped out potentially a first version of what a product might look like? Have you thought about what it would cost you to build this thing to an MVP? So there are many ways to show ideas, right? But there's some ideas that will just warrant us to look a little bit more closely than others. So I think if you are going to submit your ideas, let's be a little bit careful that we're submitting ideas that are well baked, and we're submitting concepts rather more than ideas, so concepts that we've developed.
There's an interesting question. Would FirstCheck be willing to work with startups that are not exactly in need of capital, but preferably support and networking opportunities? The answer is yes. I think that we would be. I mean, there would have to be a structure that we'll come up with for that specifically, but I don't think that do they have to apply for pipeline? I think we'll have to have a
we have to prioritize that. So I think in principle over time, when we have, we've sort of done the first tasks around like the first 6 and things like that. Do you know what I mean? And then we have a little bit more activity around the investor collective, maybe even sort of the operator collective, because it makes it much easier to then do things like that. But in principle, we want to help women succeed, right? Yes. So while we may not be able to do that on day one, it's not the first time we've had that question, and I knew what Odu's answer would be. So we're positively disposed to it.
Yeah.
There's a question here. Hi, Odun, seeing how many women want this opportunity, is there a chance you would invest in more than 6 businesses?
That's a really good question, and maybe like Eloho said, FirstCheck is me and her and a few select people, and we do have for this first year like limited resources, but we cannot say that as the year advances we will not get like more resources, better support, and we set 6 as a way to keep our goals smart, and it's not like trying to limit ourselves or anything like that. So if we achieve 6 and think that we have the capacity and capability for more than 6, then why not? So it's not like we're going to get to 6 and be like, yeah, that's all for 2021, we move. No, we're just going to keep working, and let's see where it goes.
Sure. I've gotten a couple of questions around government, so I think it's probably just worth touching on it. This one in particular says, I don't quite understand. It says, please, you guys raise funds for government or private-owned microfinance banks that want to strengthen their services to the short answer. Like, we're doing this privately. It's nothing to do with government. I'm not trying to touch it. Like, we're just trying to just get on with our lives. So no. I think we've answered the question about how many startups are we looking to invest in. I love this question. It's very specific. We're currently in the process of developing our MVP. The proof of concept is scheduled to be ready in a few weeks. Does that still make us eligible for, I don't know about sponsorship, for investments? The quick answer is yeah, absolutely. As long as you're pre-seed stage or you're at the seed stage with your MVP, then we'll happily take a look.
So yeah, this question I think we just answered. Do you also provide support to startups you're not able to invest in yet? Maybe some sort of pipeline for startups that are too early or something. So there's something that we're going to like launch specifically for startups that we cannot invest in, who others perhaps might be able to. And then just like a lady has just asked, if startups that don't necessarily need investments right now, but need support, like we will definitely, we're keeping them in mind. Perhaps not like right this minute, but it won't be long before we have a structure for them as well. We have a very, very strong interest in like an advisory, like support network, and we will definitely utilize that to the benefit of the existing startups.
Awesome. Is there a specific area in tech that you're looking for? I know fintech is quite huge.
Tech-enabled, just tech-enabled.
We're
health tech, agri-tech, identity tech, just tech-enabled, right? So tech is the future, you know, all kinds of scale and sustainability charts are there. That's kind of where we want to be because the potential for growth is like really is limitless. So that's kind of where we are. We're not going to say that this sector, we're sector agnostic. That's the short answer.
So really great question. Somebody was paying attention to the presentation. It says, have you already raised $1 million of investment capital, or will this be raised from the investor collective?
No, not from the collective. We haven't raised $1 million of investment capital, no, but we can access $1 million of investment capital. And that's one of the reasons why we're able to put it confidently on our deck.
So it's a 2-year goal. And to be honest, we're pretty comfortable. And it's really angel capital over the next 2 years or so, writing those 25K checks. So that deployment model is what we just described for that $1 million. I think what's probably a little bit more interesting than that $1 million number was the 20, which was really us saying, how do we, by virtue of having written these first checks at 25K, how do we then use those to create these pathways for the women that we've invested in to help them raise seed stage funds at 500K and $1 million and more? And that's really where it gets really interesting. And that's where that $20 million number comes from. We're really viewing that $1 million as being catalyzing or having a catalytic effect.
So guys, I will say something now. We have like 8 minutes left and we have like so many questions. So we're not going to be able to get to all of the questions, I can tell you that. But I hope that we're doing justice to the ones that we are getting to, just so we know we don't want to keep anybody for more than an hour like promised. And so we will answer as many as we can in the next 7 minutes, sorry. And then we'll just like, hopefully we'll send out mails for the application pipeline and subsequent actions. And hopefully we'll get you guys to respond and we'll take it from there. Are there restrictions for female founders who are students? No.
We keep getting this question about people, I guess people dialing in late. Will you send the deck? Will you send the video? We'll send a video, we'll send a deck. Not a problem. That's easy to answer. So there's somebody here that says just for context, but I guess that is context to a preceding question, but the questions are all coming in different orders. So it's difficult to see what it was, but it says, for context, we're a not-for-profit recently set up by a top-tier law firm in Ghana. So I guess you're saying, why do we say why do we say that we struggle to invest in non-profits? Well, it's because non-profits are not necessarily being run with venture scale in mind or venture scale objectives, right? And if we're going to make a return on our capital, we want to make venture-like return. So that's not to suggest that the work that the non-profits are doing are not important. It's very important work. But at the end of the day, you want to have the right fit with your investor, and you don't want an investor that's going to expect things that are divergent from your goals, which are not only around the financial sustainability.
Right. Yes. Okay. What is the next question? I know FirstCheck is experimental at the moment, but do you have an idea of what the next steps for startups after applications have been made? Well, yeah, after you've made the application, we will review and if there's a fit or we want more information, then we will contact you. So there's no demo day, there's no competition. It's just this is very interesting. We need to learn more. And then we start to schedule calls with founders. And Eloho and I are like super straightforward people. So we don't waste a lot of time with like back and forth. We'll tell you everything that you need to know. And we will also try as much as possible to make decisions very quickly so that we don't like keep founders waiting or expectant in that way.
One thing that I think that we're both very keen to make sure that we also do is, Odunayo's absolutely right, being responsive, making decisions quickly, all of those things, but also even just giving transparent feedback, right? So here is my struggle with the business as you presented it. So here's why we struggle with the idea, or here's why it's hard for us to invest. And that's even helpful, that kind of feedback, whilst it might be disappointing, hopefully it's feedback that allows you to potentially, increase the odds that you're successful the next time around if you come back to us or if you go to somebody else. So we want to sort of be helpful in that way as well. Will venture capitalists be allowed to be part of the investor collective? Yes, because what is really hard with venture capitalists, the few that we've spoken to, is that they want to give us capital, but that capital just will end up having all kinds of conditions to it that just stop us from being nimble in the angel fund. So the investor collective is for angels, but also it's for VCs. So if VCs want to be part of that, they want to see deal flow that's coming to the collective, absolutely. I made a comment when I was doing the slide where I said, we can't show VCs pipeline, we can't give you priority pipeline or preferential pipeline. And that's because it's not in the interest of our founders, but absolutely, we would love for VCs to be in the investor collective because it just increases our ability to serve the women that are in our.
There's a very interesting question here. Looks like you're more focused on product-based businesses. How about the service-based businesses? Are they eligible? I would say yes. I think that service-based businesses that are tech-enabled are eligible. There again, the focus here is like the business being moved forward by tech and not particularly it being a particular product or service, right? Is this sustainable and is it scalable and is it high growth? Right. Yeah. So the rest of it is in the format in which it comes is in the particular focal point. It's these other things, right? What is the capacity for returns exactly?
You have to be a citizen of an African country as a woman. So this is slightly different, well, it's not slightly, it's quite different from the diaspora question. So you could be a woman living and working in Africa, building a startup in Africa, but not necessarily be a citizen of an African country. And I think for us, this is not, we're not trying to be, around sort of how we think about things like that. There are lots of women who are not natively African who have built really interesting companies that are delivering value into Africa, right? So I think, we will have that approach to sort of evaluating startups. We won't exclude people because they're not, they don't carry African passports.
Yes, there's a question. Is the approach for your investment to be part of a startup's first round as opposed to the only first investor?
Oh, that's interesting. The quick answer is yes to the first question, right? So we don't, I guess we'll kind of see on a case by case, but part of why we have our checks written at 25 and 15K is because, there's some information that's saying to a founder, here is 3 months of capital at 25K. There's something that information gives you. If we find that if founder, we're less comfortable in situations in which you're flush with capital, that tends to mean that it's harder for you to be a little bit responsive to things like user feedback, right? Because you can just kind of keep building and keep spending on marketing and all of those things. But when you have a limited amount of capital, you have limited resources and you have to make them work, then we think that just, that tells us a lot as investors around the kinds of companies you want to work with. So as much as the answer is no, we don't necessarily look to be the only investor at that stage. We will be uncomfortable if we are a 25K check in $500,000 of a round.
Yeah, exactly that. This is nice. When an application is submitted and rejected for some reason, is there a second opportunity for an applicant to re-strategize and reconfigure the product strategy and then put up a second application? Absolutely. That's actually something I would actually look out for. That like, is this your first time applying or is this your second time? And between the first and second time, what has changed? And I think that's very interesting. And obviously, yes, there's always a second and probably a third opportunity. Maybe no more than 3, Sha.
There's one here which I believe is directed at me. Are you suggesting that social impact companies aren't sustainable? I never suggest anything. And no, I didn't suggest any such thing. I said that aside from the sustainability, what I actually said was aside from the sustainability goals, they're not necessarily being run to maximize profits, right? And you don't want investors who are pulling across purposes with that objective.
7 o'clock.
Oh, sorry. And yeah, that's like my clock telling us that we're actually out of time. If you are of African descent but don't have citizenship in any African, I don't know how that works. So
I don't answer that. We're not necessarily looking for passports.
Yeah. Love the idea of true partners. How would you identify if a woman is a true partner or a token founder? Well, equity is a start. If there's two co-founders in a business and the woman has 5% and the male co-founder has 30%, I would question that. So we will start from there. And then we'll ask subsequent questions around operational roles and divisions and decision-making. And on a call, you have both of those founders there. It's very easy to tell from how they relate and how they answer questions and who is doing most of the answering, and if it's both of them or just one person, whether someone has a lot of information about the business or not.
Okay. I don't think, do you want to take any more?
I know, I think we should stop here so that we can keep to our word. But I would like to say thank you guys so much for joining us. I saw a lot of people looking for co-founders in the chat. I think that's awesome. And people are making connections and, chatting on WhatsApp. So thank you guys. Thank you for joining. And you get a mail in the next 45 minutes. And, startup founders can start applying and investors can start joining the mailing list and partners can start contacting us as well. So thank you guys, and I hope you have a great weekend.
Thank you. Thank you everyone for joining. Thank you very much. I thoroughly enjoyed it.
Right. Good night.
Bye.